Ladies and gentlemen, friends of the Barents Corporation, good morning and welcome to a new webinar about transport under the Norwegian presidency. My name is Paul Iversen. I will be the moderator of today's webinar, and I would like to welcome you all, but also give you some practical information. This meeting is translated into Russian and English, and in order to receive the translation, you have to be using the Zoom client, and you will find at the bottom row a globe symbol, and when you are using the globe symbol, you will have to choose between English and Russian. So that is giving you access to the translation. You are also welcome to ask questions in the chat function or the Q&A box. This event will also be recorded and be available at the web pages of the International Barents Secretariat. Today we will pay attention to maritime transport, the transport mode for large volumes and long distances, as well as for transporting passengers. This is the fourth event under the Norwegian presidency for BEATA, and where we investigate the joint challenges for the different transport modes, presents plans and examples on how to make the transport sector greener and safer. Today's webinar will highlight sustainable shipping in Arctic waters. Shipping is a global industry. The oceans are connecting the world markets. Short sea shipping provides effective transport solutions, and people can enjoy sea voyages like short ferry rides or spend some time on cruise vessels taking them all over the world, also in this region. Our waters are demanding with vulnerable environment. We have to reduce the harmful emissions from maritime activities to the atmosphere, and we have to be prepared to save people and the environment if any unwanted incident occurs. A cornerstone in the Norwegian government's High North policy is to ensure peaceful, sustainable and a prosperous development in this region through increased activity, presence and knowledge. More than 80% of the shipping in the Arctic today passes through Norwegian waters. As a responsible flag and coastal state, it is important for us to balance the opportunities and challenges in a safe and environmentally way. The ocean has immense potential for new value creation, and we believe we in the future will see more activities in the Arctic. Shipping will play a major role in these activities. Firstly, because of the potential opening of new sea routes in the future, both for intra-regional and polar transit. Secondly, because of vast opportunities in everything from minerals to offshore oil and gas activity, as well as maritime tourism. There is no clear general trend in the shipping activities in the Arctic for the last 5 years. However, we can see an increase in activity among tankers in particular, but also fishing vessels, reefers and passenger vessels are on the rise. The traffic with offshore-related vessels have had the largest reduction in activity over the period. There is furthermore increased interest from large shipping nations such as China, South Korea, Singapore and Japan. An increase in shipping activity in the Arctic constitutes a risk to the vulnerable Arctic environment and must be met with relevant measures to reduce the risk of accidents and pollution. At the same time, the extreme weather conditions with ice and different charting and communications challenges will be a constant challenge to the ships, its crew and its passengers. A lot has been done in the last decade to enhance safety at sea in Arctic. Most importantly is the work on preventing accidents. The Norwegian government has been and still is working both nationally and internationally to ensure a sustainable shipping in the Arctic. Ships operating in the Arctic are ships of all flags, not only flags in the Arctic states. Thus, the challenges in the Arctic knows no border and must be met through international cooperation. Both the IMO and the Arctic Council have roles to play. Global cooperation is key to solving global challenges, and the IMO is instrumental in establishing a global level playing field for the maritime industry. The Arctic Council plays a role through its important work and produces excellent research and analysis on risks, and these have been used by maritime regulators both nationally and globally in their considerations on the need for revised or new global regulation for shipping. The working groups PAME and EPPR are good platforms to discuss shipping issues and to have preliminary discussion on the possibility to have a common front in the IMO. PAME has an expert shipping group, a group in which several shipping administrations participate. We also have good cooperations from flag states observers to the Arctic Council, such as China, Singapore, and Korea. Furthermore, several European states participate besides the Arctic states. PAME has over the last years developed good cooperation with the maritime industry, and we will continue to work together with the industry to promote the safety of navigation and protection of the Arctic marine environment. We will now leave the floor to our first speaker today. And we have invited the chair of the Arctic Council to hold a presentation on how the Arctic Council are working with shipping in Arctic waters to make it better, safer, and more sustainable. We will also receive a short intervention on recent development of maritime transport technologies, focusing on autonomous navigation. I am happy to introduce the permanent representative from the Russian Federation to the IMO, Mr. Yuri Melenas. Mr. Melenas, the floor is yours.
Спасибо, Пол, за представление. Добрый день, доброе утро, уважаемые участники вебинара, дамы и господа. Для меня является честью выступить перед вами о роли Арктического совета и о приоритетах российского председательства на этом межправительственном форуме. Как вы знаете, как я уже сказал, Арктический совет – это ведущий межправительственный форум, содействующий сотрудничеству, координации и взаимодействию между арктическими государствами, коренными общинами и жителями Арктики. Судоходство играет, безусловно, важнейшую роль в обеспечении жизнедеятельности населения Арктики. В рамках Арктического совета создано 6 рабочих групп. Рабочая группа по защите арктической морской среды, ПАМE, о которой уже упомянул Пол, является тем органом, который непосредственно рассматривает вопросы и обсуждает проекты, связанные с судоходством. Работа Арктического совета предполагает реализацию исследовательских проектов и подготовку отчетов и рекомендаций, которые впоследствии могут лечь в основу национальных мер регулирования или предложений по универсальным мерам для рассмотрения в Международную морскую организацию ИМО. В рамках ПАМE действует экспертная группа по судоходству. За время своей работы группа подготовила отчеты по таким направлениям, как оценка роста судоходства в Арктике и ее регионах, использование тяжелых сортов судового топлива в Арктике и другие. На сегодня в экспертной группе по судоходству рассматривается несколько актуальных проектов. В частности, разработка интерпретаций к положениям Полярного кодекса, оценка поведения низкосернистого судового топлива при нахождении в холодной воде, изучение влияния подводного шума от судов на морские организмы в Арктике и другие. В мае 2021 года, в этом году, председательство в Арктическом совете перешло от Исландии к Российской Федерации на предстоящий двухлетний период. Сквозным приоритетом председательства нашей страны в Арктическом совете обозначена тематика ответственного управления для устойчивой Арктики. А основная задача способствовать продвижению коллективных подходов к обеспечению устойчивого развития арктического региона. Под устойчивым развитием понимается соблюдение баланса в его социальном, экономическом и природоохранных измерениях. Конструктивное сотрудничество и координация Арктического совета с другими региональными структурами. В рамках председательства Российской Федерации в Арктическом совете в целом намечено 4 приоритетных направления сотрудничества. Первое. Население Арктики, включая коренные и малочисленные народы Севера. Второе. Охрана окружающей среды, включая изменение климата. Третье. Социально-экономический рост в регионе. Четвертое. Укрепление Арктического совета. Помимо официальных совещаний, в рамках программы российского председательства намечено проведение большого количества мероприятий в Российской Федерации, включая международные конференции и семинары. Так, например, в ближайшие месяцы запланировано проведение при координации Министерства транспорта России международного семинара по развитию малой авиации в Арктике. По вопросам, связанным с арктическим судоходством, можно отметить следующие основные элементы программы российского председательства. Первое. Обеспечение функционирования механизма по вопросам защиты морской среды при старших должностных лицах. SAO Marine Mechanism. Второе. Сотрудничество с Арктическим экономическим советом, в том числе по тематике арктического судоходства. Третье. Сотрудничество по проработке региональных договоренностей о портовых приемных сооружениях, которые удовлетворяют потребности судов, заходящих в порты и на терминалы в пределах арктического региона. Это один из текущих проектов с участием Российской Федерации. В настоящее время подготовлены предложения по соответствующим поправкам Конвенции Марпол, которые будут представлены в ИМО в ближайшие месяцы. Четвертое. Обеспечение председательства в информационном форуме наилучшей практики в области арктического судоходства. Председательство в форуме в настоящее время перешло к Российской Федерации на срок ее председательства в Арктическом совете. Этот проект представляет собой веб-портал, на котором сводится полезная информация по арктическому судоходству, наполняемая арктическими государствами и заинтересованными сторонами. Также ежегодно в Лондоне в штаб-квартире ИМО в очном формате или в формате вебинара проводятся совещания форума с участием арктических государств, постоянных участников Арктического совета, приглашенных экспертов и представителей других заинтересованных государств и организаций. В Форум является удобной площадкой для неформального обсуждения важных и актуальных вопросов осуществления Полярного кодекса и арктического судоходства в целом. Пятое. Развитие безопасного и устойчивого судоходства в Арктике. Перспектива использования Северного морского пути в качестве транспортного коридора, включая развитие портовой инфраструктуры. В этом ключе важным представляется обеспечить сбалансированный подход на основе комплексного учета аспектов защиты морской среды и необходимости обеспечить устойчивое экономическое развитие Арктики, включая интересы коренных народов и местного населения. Далее, шестое. Укрепление поисково-спасательного потенциала, эффективного выполнения региональных соглашений о поиске и спасании и реагировании на инциденты, связанные с загрязнением. Представляется целесообразным расширение практики проведения совместных учений арктических государств и обмен опытом. Арктический форум береговых охран АФБО в этом контексте является важной платформой для диалога, консультаций, коммуникаций и сотрудничества между его странами-участницами. Седьмое. Еще одно важное направление работ, связанное с арктическим судоходством, которому Российская Федерация планирует уделять внимание в ходе своего председательства в Арктическом совете, это, как сказал Пол, также автономное судовождение. Мы рассматриваем это как способ существенно повысить безопасность судоходства и защиту морской среды. Российская Федерация разработала соответствующую нормативную базу и приступает к практическому применению технологий автономного судовождения. В этом году в России завершается пилотный проект по опытной эксплуатации автономных судов под российским флагом. В рамках пилотного проекта технологии автоматического и дистанционного управления испытываются на судах в условиях их реальной коммерческой эксплуатации. Одним из таких судов является челночный танкер «Михаил Ульянов», который эксплуатируется в Баренцевом море. В рамках эксперимента разрабатывается концепция беспилотного конвоя во главе с одним постом управления беспилотными судами, установленным на борту другого судна. Такая конфигурация может быть полезна в условиях Арктики, когда станция дистанционного управления установлена на борту ледокола, ведущего за собой колонну полностью беспилотных судов. Autonomous vessels. Мы готовы поделиться своим опытом в вопросах, связанных с автономным судоходством, и приглашаем наших коллег к сотрудничеству. В целом, дамы и господа, Российская Федерация настроена на конструктивное взаимодействие по всем вопросам работы Арктического совета, включая и вопросы, связанные с арктическим судоходством. И, безусловно, важным является продолжение конструктивного взаимодействия в рамках других региональных площадок, включая Совет Баренцева Евроарктического региона. Спасибо за внимание.
Thank you very much, Mr. Melenas, for your comprehensive introduction to the Russian chair of the Arctic Council, and as well recent development in information technology. And this is bridging the next speaker from the Barents Watch, and the Barents Watch is a Norwegian digital information system collecting and sharing informations on many topics related to Norwegian coastal and maritime areas. A wave forecast, sea ice conditions, support tools for search and rescue operations, and mapping of fisheries and other marine activities are among the many features they can provide. And it's a great pleasure to welcome Ms. Nina Buvang-Voya, General Manager at Barents Watch. And Nina, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Thank you for that introduction, and thank you for inviting me to speak about Barents Watch in this webinar. It is a great pleasure to be here, and I am, as some of you will know, quite new on this job, and I see here in this webinar some very familiar faces from my previous job as the director of the Arctic Council Secretariat. So very, very nice to be here with you. I hope that you now see my screen, my presentation. Yes. I am usually located in Tromsø in Norway. That's where Barents Watch is headquartered. But I am joining you today from Longyearbyen, from Svalbard, where I have been this last week, together with several of my colleagues from Barents Watch, and we have been involved and engaged in search and rescue and oil spill exercises where the Barents Watch platforms and information services have been used. Just the last couple of days, we were actually in Barentsburg and doing an oil spill exercise together with our Russian friends there. It was a very successful exercise, and I think it proved that we are in a good place for, and we have a solid foundation for good cooperation also in this field here in Svalbard, which is very good to know. Let me see now if I can. I want to go to the next slide, but my keyboard doesn't seem to react. Maybe somebody can help me from the technical side.
Can you try to click with a clicker on the PowerPoint slide a couple of times?
There we go. Yes, thank you. That's a good advice. Something was stuck. So the overarching goal for Barents Watch is, like Paul said, to collect, develop, and share knowledge about the Norwegian ocean and coastal areas. The vision from the start of Barents Watch, which was almost 10 years ago, was to give a joint overview over the situation at sea in the Norwegian waters in real time to all the different agencies and parts of the Norwegian administration who needs to have this overview. The task of Barents Watch is to offer reliable, effective, and secure digital services that make it easy to cooperate across and between the different sectors and the different ministries and the different agencies who are responsible for ocean and coast related matters. Furthermore, it is also in the mandate of BarentsWatch to provide easy access and user-friendly access to combined, relevant, updated, and reliable data to the authorities in Norway, to the business sector, and also to individuals who use and or need information about the Norwegian ocean and coastal areas. So to reach these goals, it is only possible when we combine data and information across and from all the different ministries, departments, agencies, and institutes who are involved in the maritime sector. As we all know who are here in this webinar, these are many, many different actors and stakeholders. So if we were to try to identify what are the most important key words to know about BarentsWatch, then I would say it is a public initiative, it's government funded, it is about digitalization, it is about sharing data and making data available, and also in addition to combine data from different sources in such a way that it becomes useful for all of our users who are, as I said, both in the public sector, but also in the private sector, in the business, and among regular citizens. As you can read here, BarentsWatch consists of two parts. One is an open and public part with several services offered. And the second one is a non-public part, which is designated for Norwegian operational agencies. Formally, BarentsWatch is organized under the Norwegian Coastal Administration and under the Ministry of Transport in the Government of Norway. BarentsWatch has, in addition to this, our formal structure, we also have many other owners, as you can see on this slide. We have nothing less than 10 ministries who are involved as partners and owners, so to speak, of BarentsWatch, and a whole long list of 29 agencies and institutes who are involved in this cooperation. And the whole idea, as you can see, is to make sure that even if all of these ministries and agencies have their own systems who work very well, what BarentsWatch can offer in addition is to find ways to work across the different systems and the different data sets. BarentsWatch does not own or produce any data on our own. We get all of our data from these, our partners, through cooperation, and we get access to the data. We develop new ways to present them, and not least to combine them in useful services. BarentsWatch works using the so-called agile methodology. It means that we don't do huge projects in one go. We develop have a very stepwise approach in development of new services in close contact with the users. So this is a slide to give you a small taste about the open information services that we have. Paul mentioned some of them in the introduction. They are quite different in scope and in terms of who are the users. But they all have in common that they are publicly available, they are free of charge, and they are developed for a specific user group. And all of them are somehow connected to the ocean and to maritime activities. Some or one of the services that you can see there in Norwegian, I see the fiskehelse, the fish health, is directed specifically to the fish farming industry. So for those who are involved in that, that gives interesting information service and provides operational service as well. We also have a space management tool for marine planners, directed and designated specifically to that kind of work. There are two services, however, that I would like to perhaps focus a little bit more on today for you, as I think it might be relevant for all of you who are working in and around, I should say, the Barents Sea. It is the Fish Info and the Arctic Info. The Fish Info service is directed towards the fishing industry, meaning the fishermen and the fishing boats who are doing their activities in Norwegian waters. If you are a fisherman, you can use Fish Info both before and during your fishing when you are out at sea. You can see on the map where the other boats are. You can see where there is fishing activity already, and you can see what kind of tools have been set out in the waters already. You can also see where there is other activity that you need to be aware of and you might want to avoid. For example, petroleum activity, or maybe satellite activity, or other kinds of installations that is useful to know as a fisherman. This is one of our services that have had a big increase of in terms of numbers of users. The fishermen tell us that they really like this tool, they find it useful, and the number of users is growing. Recently, now we are adding also a new feature that they can actually meet their reporting requirements using this tool that they already have open on board the boat in a very easy manner. They can finish their reporting on their catches and what tools they are using and where the tools are. They can do it to the Coast Guard directly in this app or on this website. Next, a little bit about Arctic Info. It's our newest service. It was released just before the pandemic, so we have not really seen it fully operational yet, perhaps. It is developed for vessels operating in the Arctic, and in this case, this means from the area around the Norwegian-Russian border and over across to Canada. It includes, again, a detailed map with data from many different sources put neatly together in one place. So you can get the situation about the ice conditions, icebergs that have been released from the glaciers in Greenland. You get the currents, you have the meteorological data integrated in there, and also all of the different alerts and warnings that the meteorological authorities in the different parts of this area release. We have a good cooperation here with Denmark and with the Greenlandic authorities. So one nice little feature that is added here is that vessels who are planning to go to harbor in Greenland, they can now finish their reports and fill in the forms and send them directly in this system. So the purpose is to make life easier for those who are on board these vessels. Moving on to the other part of Barents Watch. We have one part with services that are not intended for the public. They are more tools, so to speak, for the Norwegian government administration. It consists of two different services. One is the ocean monitoring service, and the other one is a joint register of resources. all of the different resources that all of the different stakeholders have available. Both of these services have in common that there are some access requirements, and you have to use your Norwegian bank ID to get access to the system, in addition to be given access because you need it professionally. For both of these two platforms, the basic point has been to develop these as platforms for communication and coordination across the different agencies. So we see that the operational agencies, those who need to be out on the sea for different reasons, they can, when they need to contact other organizations or other institutions on sea, they can use our platform. And as you all know, for example, in search and rescue operations, there are many different agencies involved, and this is one of the things that we have exercised all this week in Svalbard, is to how to use BarentsWatch as a platform for increasing this coordination. So wrapping up, concluding that BarentsWatch offers several different information services. Our users are spread around in many different professions, but they are, for the most part, related to maritime and marine administration and activities. I would say perhaps the search and rescue is an exception, because there we don't make a distinction between search and rescue on the sea or on land. It's the same resources, so to speak, who are called upon for executing a search and rescue operation. So in the registry of resources, we are also on land. Might be useful to know. BarentsWatch is about digitalization of data that we already have available, but it's about making the data, increasing the value of the data and making it available to more people, to a wider audience, and therefore increasing their value. BarentsWatch is really about making information available for those who need it, when they need it, to have it accessible in an easy and user-friendly, hopefully, way. So I think that finishes my presentation. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Nina. It was very interesting, and we got a very good impression of the huge source of information and knowledge that the BarentsWatch is providing. And knowledge and competence is also the key words for the two next interventions. Seafarers are key to safe maritime operations. This is, of course, essential in Arctic operations. In this section, we will hear the views of the importance of the seafarers' education and training for operations in the Arctic. And the next speaker is an experienced seafarer from Arctic and Antarctic waters, now a senior inspector in the Finnish Agency for Transport and Communication, Traficom. Mr. Panu Ured, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Paul Iversen, and good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Panu Ured, working as a senior inspector in the Finnish Transport and Communication Agency in maritime qualifications and piloting. And due to my background, I will bring the mariner's point of view. My background is in a different type of ships operating in the Arctic, subarctic, and the Antarctic waters. I have also served as an ice navigator in Canadian Arctic waters. I'm holding an unlimited master's license and a certificate of proficiency in advanced training for ships operating in polar waters, and the Nautical Institute Ice Navigator Training Level 2 certificate. The ice navigator scheme provided by the Nautical Institute builds upon the basic requirements for the Polar Code and are combining STCV adaptations with additional elements so as to ensure ship officers are not only trained but also experienced in ice at sea. Ships operating in the Arctic environment are exposed to a number of unique risks. Poor weather conditions and relative lack of good charts, communication systems, and other navigational aids pose challenges for mariners. Much of the Arctic water lack proper chart surveys. Only about 10% of the Canadian Arctic waters have been surveyed. The minimum training and experience requirements for the operating in the Arctic waters are laid out in the STCV. STCV set out the details of knowledge, understanding, and proficiency that apply to both the basic and the advanced training required under the Polar Code, and the necessary sea experience in polar waters. Experiences of operating vessels in ice at sea is not necessarily required, as STCV states that navigating in polar waters or equivalent approved seagoing service may also count as acceptable experience. This education should provide the competence where the mariner should understand and internalize a holistic perception, among the other things, ship capabilities and limitations, ice conditions, and their correct identification, weather conditions, and navigating in ice. Vessels have to be ice classed according to regional and at times local requirements to be able to enter an area that is governed by an ice regime. The ice class defines what kind of ice the vessel is designed to withstand, and not the area the vessel will sail or operate in. Some vessels are built to withstand large amounts and forces of ice, whilst other vessels only need to encounter little ice before being damaged. Officers need to be able to identify all sea ice and smaller forms of glacial ice. It is also harder to identify smaller crawlers compared to large icebergs, but the crawler can cause serious damage to the hull. Satellite images are getting better and less expensive. It is important to understand the satellite images can obsolete only a couple of hours because ice can be drifting at speed of several knots. Specific ice experience is essential to ensure that ship officers are competent in handling their ships in ice at sea. Safe navigation in ice conditions means finding the easiest path within the sea ice that could endanger or beset the ship. And in cases of crawlers and bergy pits, avoiding them so the ship hull is not damaged. The radar is the main bridge equipment in ice navigation, and it is important to learn and study the use of radar in daylight and good visibility. When the curtains are closed and the zero visibility lands, the mariner should be able to navigate safely using the radar. So, conclusion. The education and competence are the key safety factors in the Arctic waters, and the making the correct decision are the key for a successful outcome. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Panu. This is the mariner's perspective is of course crucial. Our next speaker, Siv Kristin Golos, is a Specialty Director in the Department of International Maritime Regulation and Maritime Safety in the Norwegian Ministry of Trade and Fisheries. She is the head of delegation to several IMO committees and represents Norway on polar shipping issues, both in the Arctic Council and the Arctic Treaty. She has also participated in development of the Polar Code in IMO. Siv, I'm glad you're with us, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Paul, and good morning to all. Well, I don't necessarily think we have the same vision, the mariners and the government, with regard to the importance of seafarers for the safety of the ship. They are vital to upholding a high standard of safety and security on board ships, no matter where they operate. And Norway is committed to strengthening the maritime education and the development of maritime knowledge to ensure that the future needs of the industry are met. In the years to come, as also mentioned earlier today, we expect to see a continued increase of ship activities in the Arctic. And a lot has been done the last decade to enhance safety at sea, and most importantly is to work on preventing accidents. Norway has been and will still continue to working both nationally and internationally to ensure that ships are built, equipped for operations in these areas. Furthermore, that the crew on board has the necessary knowledge and is trained to handle the specific challenges in the Arctic. And as mentioned earlier today, operating in the Arctic constitutes specific risks to the ship, the crew, and its passengers. The adoption of the Polar Code was an important development as a global standard setter, and was, in our view, crucial for the enhancement of maritime safety and environmental protection in these areas. As mentioned by Finland earlier, the code does contain training requirements. However, it does not contain perhaps a more general training requirement covering all crew. Knowledge on the specific conditions that prevail in the Arctic is essential in achieving sustainable development, safety at sea, and for reducing the risk for accident. It is important for the Norwegian government to strengthen the general training and education for seafarers operating in these areas. Furthermore, it is important to ensure a close cooperation between training institutions and industry, so that the training offered satisfy the actual need of the industry. In 2019, the Norwegian government took measures to strengthen the knowledge and training of seafarers in the Arctic, and we are co-funding a project led by the industry. And in 2020, that means last year, an Arctic Maritime Knowledge Hub was established. The hub consists of representatives from the industry and training institutions in Norway. And its aim is to increase the general knowledge of the crew on specific challenges connected to ship operations in the Arctic. And furthermore, the hub will strengthen the cooperation between training institutions and the industry, and thus facilitate for a more tailor-made training course. On a final note, allow me to briefly mention an important outcome from a series of search and rescue exercises undertaken in ice-influenced water north of Svalbard. This was in 2016, 17, and 19. The scenario was a mass evacuation from a cruise vessel in distress in Arctic waters. Bearing in mind the potential catastrophic outcome of such an event, it is of general interest to study and train on how survival can be ensured over a time period that is sufficient for a rescue vessel to arrive with assistance. Up until now, we as regulators have in general been focusing a lot on the equipment, etc., paying perhaps less attention to the human element with regard to passengers using the equipment, as well as the crew leading the evacuation. The exercises clearly showed that strong leadership is essential, and the crew and the survival craft captain's knowledge and experience are critical factors of success. This is currently not addressed as such in the standard maritime training regime, and this valuable outcome will also be addressed by the hub. the Knowledge Hub. And the results coming out of the hub will be valuable for us in the government and also for our work both nationally as well as globally. So upholding and strengthening the skills and trainings for seafarers on ships operating in the Arctic is important for all states with ships operating in these areas. And cooperation is therefore key, and Norway will consider submissions both to the Arctic Council as well as to IMO on these matters. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Siv, for your intervention and casting light upon the human factor. Speaking about the human factor, we would like to have a break now. We will have a break for 4 minutes, and be back in 5 minutes. That is 5 to 11 Norwegian time. So see you in 5 minutes. Thank you. Welcome back, everyone. The Norwegian rescue services are carried out through cooperation between government agencies, voluntary organizations, and private companies who have resources appropriate for rescue services. However, the Joint Rescue Coordination Centers in Norway have the overall responsibility during search and rescue operations. And we have two of them, one for southern Norway and one for northern Norway, including the Norwegian Arctic waters. I am pleased to introduce Tore Hongset from the Joint Rescue Center in northern Norway. Tore, the floor is yours.
Hello, everyone. I hope you can hear me. Currently, I'm at Svalbard, same place as Nina is. We are, however, in different rooms. We have been up here participating in the Arctic mass rescue operation exercise that was conducted last week. And we also have been here doing some work with together with the governor of Svalbard. We have an audit responsibility for the local rescue services up here. And I will try to share my presentation with you. So there we go. Or do we? Yeah, there we are. I will say a couple of words about search and rescue in the Arctic, seen from our point of view. As mentioned from Paul here, we have the responsibility for land, sea, and air rescue in Norway. But I will primarily focus on the maritime part of things seen from the Arctic perspective. We are a part of the Arctic search and rescue area, and you can see now our area of responsibility divided between South Norway and North Norway. Norway is the second largest coastline country in the world. In my rescue area, we don't have that many resources, but we have a huge area to cover when it comes to, we should call that maybe in a way, customers. A lot of distance, not that many resources. I'll get back to that a bit later on. We do have Svalbard as a very central point close to the Arctic, which has a kind of infrastructure that is feasible for us. With a large airport, there is a hospital here, and we also do have a couple of rescue helicopters which are stationed at the Svalbard location. In the Arctic, there is a lot of activity. If you look at the illustration on the left, you can see two distinctive colors here. One is the yellow color, mapping fisheries, the activity of fishing vessels in the Barents area. And if you look at the green scenario, you see all the transport going along the coastlines of Norway and Russia. You can also see on the right-hand side the air traffic. This is a time snap of air traffic crossing over the Arctic area, which means that there are a lot of persons, a lot of potential accidents that can happen due to the heavy traffic up there. Explorer cruise industry is steadily increasing in the north. There are a lot of different areas where they go to, and for us, Spitsbergen and so the areas around the Spitsbergen and Svalbard is very much of interest. But this does, as you can see from the list, not only include our area, but all the areas up in the north. Some of the challenges for rescue operations in the Arctic are listed here. There are long distances between mainlands. We do not have that many resources, but we do have extreme weather conditions through the year. Weather reporting is not 100%. We do have polar lows that can come from almost nothing and suddenly appear as a troublesome thing. We do have freezing spray during the winter. There is a fog problem during the summer. Communications are not 100%. You can never be sure that your call will be picked up or received, either calling a distress or trying to reach someone. There are various types of ice. Some of the areas close to, for instance, close to Svalbard, you cannot 100% trust a map that the map is 100% when it comes to how the conditions really are. And during a period of the year, there's also a very dark period with the absence of daylight. Typically here you can see incidents from the last 4-year period. All these red dots are separate incidents that do happen. Not all of them are included in the map. Typically, the kind of incidents you might have is stuck in ice. You can have a fire on board in the vessel, a typical medical evacuation. It could be a boat with a listing. You can have a boat that run ashore as a grounding. You can have a boat that is starting to sink. A part of these incidents we share with our Russian colleagues. We do have a limit on the about 35 degrees east where we share the responsibility, and some of these we do have to cooperate with our colleagues on the other side. And because of this cooperation, typically between us and our friends in Russia, we do have special agreements that goes between Russia and Norway, and we also do have regularly exercises between our two countries. Typically, what you can see on the screen here is the exercise that we do every year, which is called the exercise Barents, which is a combined search and rescue and oil spill exercise that we do in the Varangerfjord area between Russia and Norway. And we have a special agreement regulating this kind of activity. Couple of pictures just to show you what they do when they practice this. We do cross practice with that Norwegian helicopters land or deliver people into Russian vessels and the other way around. We do combined operations also when it comes to oil spill and handling of distress and people in a distressed situation. This agreement also has given us some practical experience, because if you see now the red star on the map, a few years ago we had an exercise, not an exercise, sorry, a live incident where we were asked from the Russian Rescue Coordination Center to go into their area and help them in assisting people that were in distress at this point. And because of us having this agreement and because of us training on this was a very easy thing to do. We could cross the border and assist the Russians in this incident. There was a big transport ship that went aground, and there was a Norwegian rescue helicopter that popped into the area and rescued 12 of the persons on board. And we do have cooperations, we do have meetings, we do have workshops in order to make search and rescue between the countries go as fluently as possible. Here you can see a typical seminar from, I think this is in Kirkenes, where you can see Russian colleagues and people from the Norwegian rescue services working together in a seminar. On top of everything in the Arctic, we do have this SAR in the Arctic agreement, which is signed by all the Arctic members through the Arctic Council. In this agreement, there are a lot of points that motivates us for working together, typically to share information, to share best practices, to share lessons learned, to do things together in order to make search and rescue an innovative arena, because we are all part of the same area. And when you go all the way up to the North Pole, all the search and rescue regions do meet. So we have to cooperate and collaborate on what's going on up there. When it comes to best practice, what we do and what we would like to do, I have listed some points on the side here. You can say, and we do like to, and we have a system for communicating with our neighboring RSCCs, so the Rescue Coordination Centers. We would also like to try in every instance to have a common information picture to make everyone aware of what's going on. We also would like to have, and we try as best as we can to have a kind of search and rescue infrastructure overview. And when it comes to infrastructure here, I don't mean necessarily the vessels and the aircraft, but more typically airfields, fuel storages, ports, and so on. Of course, if possible, also to have a little overview of where are the actual SAR assets in the area. We also like to work together in utilizing new technology. We also like to have an overview of what you can find in the area in case of typically mass rescue operations, whether it's an aircraft or a big vessel with a lot of passengers that you may have to start a mass rescue operation, and you might need safe havens as a part of the rescue operation. And we also know we like to discuss and promote the use of crew competence, as we call it, when it comes to the vessel in distress, because even though you might be in distress, you might have people on the ship or the vessel or the aircraft that can help being a part of the rescue operation as such. When it comes to communication with the rescue coordination centers, things we do and things we can do, we can have regular communication checks, as easy as just picking up the phone, make a phone call, send a mail, do a kind of contact regime to them in order to find our colleague on the other side and just actually have a chat. We can do exercises together. It could be a small tabletop exercise. It could be a big live exercise. We also like to visit the different rescue coordination centers just in order to meet other people. What we should do to develop this is to find systems for sharing information, find a way to share information pictures on the same platform, and also create a situational awareness if we have an incident going on. When it comes to what I mentioned about SAR assets and SAR infrastructure, which are two separate things here, but as I say, there are very few SAR assets in the Arctic because the area is large and not that much of civilizations up here. But we need to know what kind of assets, search and rescue assets, we normally can find in this area, and we should have a comprehension of what these assets can contribute with. Typically, how fast do they move? What kind of endurance do they have? What kind of load can they carry when it comes to evacuating people? What's the endurance? But we don't specifically have to know where they are at any given moment, but we need to know something about the capacities of the SAR assets. And as I mentioned previously, the SAR infrastructure, then we have to have a list about where to find harbors, where to find airfields, where to find fuel depots. Is there any hospital beds in the area? Do any nations have emergency drop kits? Typically, that kind of stuff that is a part of the infrastructure that could be a part of a search and rescue incident. So in a way, call that know what to ask for when you contact a neighboring RCC. I should also mention that all the pictures I have on this brief is from the exercise just before the weekend from the Arctic MRO here at Svalbard. So these are very new pictures. We like to look into new technology. We want to look into all the possibilities to get better and better information. Typically on site, for us being in the rescue services, we like to have a situation picture. We would like to have a perspective on persons in water, the rescue operation being on deck. For people in the in the oil spill business, they would like to have a situation awareness as well. We also have scenarios going on these days about radiological search and rescue problems that also need technology on site to give indicators and readings. We want to enhance the local communication, so the distress site communication when it comes to situation awareness, create this common picture, share information regarding the incident and the resources on site. And using new technology here, using drones, as you can see in the picture, using satellite, broadband, all new technologies that can enhance this picture is very, very important for us to discuss and to go through with. When you have a mass rescue operation, it will be important for us to consider alternative safe havens through the evacuation phase, because you can easily have a situation where you are not able to pick up persons directly and take them back to a safe place. So you might have to make a temporary stop and just take people off the ship, put them on shore, and then put them from shore and back to the safe area. This has to be planned because you need equipment in order to evacuate people into dry land and store them there before you take them into the mainland or into a city or a safe haven. So this is also a kind of very important picture for the rescue operations in the Arctic, that you have to consider the using a base in order to collect people before you bring them into a safe position. Typically, 3 years ago, we had this North Guider incident up at on another side of Svalbard. Was this trawler on the picture was in a distress situation. The plan A was to bring the fishermen directly from the boat back to Longyearbyen with helicopters, but the plan B had to be developed because the weather was a limit here, and we thought that if it was not possible to take them directly back to Svalbard, we had to pick them off the boat, bring them on land, because not far away from the boat there was a cabin which was owned by the governor, and there was a possibility to just drop the persons there, break into the cabin, and leave them there until the weather got better. But luckily we didn't have to get into that situation. As you can see, this incident was far away from Spitsbergen. The weather was foul, but the helicopters did make it. But we had to consider the possibility of using alternative safe haven while waiting for better weather. I think we'll indulge you to use 1 minute to look at a little video of the scenario, how it actually was up there, seen from the helicopter's view. Yeah, I'll just skip the sound here, but you can see now how things were looking. With a poor visibility, wind, icing conditions, and the people on the boat worried whether they would be picked up or not, because they did send their distress signals. But they had to wait until they actually saw a helicopter coming in, because the communications in this area is very poor. So they were considering themselves to go into the life rafts, go into the sea, and try to find their way onto land. Luckily, the helicopters did come and could pick them up directly in these conditions. But these are kind of circumstances we have to consider up in the Arctic, that even though you have a plan A, it's not 100% sure that the plan A will work when it comes to fighting against the weather. So you see here the boat having a severe list, and the rescue operator from the helicopter is doing his job to get onto the boat, getting the passengers off again. Another thing we are very concerned about in a positive way is to actually use specialists and crew that you do have. This picture from the mass rescue operation last week, you see in the middle here the woman with the yellow jacket. She is a tour guide, being a part of the cruise company. And in this situation, it was a very ideal combination to have specialists on board, because a lot of the expeditionary vessels that cruise along the coasts up here in the Arctic, they do have professional guides, and they are used to being outdoors. They are used to handling people. They are used to operate emergency kits. And they can actually be a very effective part of a rescue operation when you land people on shore where there is nothing and you have to establish a distress camp. And they can actually be used as an asset during this evacuation. Here you see her together with the local police from Svalbard, who also is a part of the rescue operation system. And of course, any crew member of any boat, as the crew members on ships, they know what they are doing. So as long as they are not injured, they can also be considered an asset, a resource for us in when we are conducting a rescue operation. So seen from our side, we would like to say that knowledge about each other creates possibilities, and it in a way enhances our list of resources and assets and possibilities to make a successful search and rescue operation. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much, Tore, for your very good illustrations and as well as very concrete examples of search and rescue operations and the challenges. Operations against acute pollution in the Arctic are demanding. Attention is given to the development also of new types of fuel, which may be sustainable and less carbon intensive, but gives us challenges and which will require new knowledge. The Norwegian Coastal Administration has initiated several projects to increase the ability to handle incidents of acute pollution in the High North. And we are very pleased to have Senior Advisor Rune Bergstrøm with us, and he will tell more about the work done. And Rune, I'm happy to give the floor to you.
Thank you very much. I have also been following this exercise. I'm actually the incident commander for the Norwegian Coastal Administration. And it's interesting, I also followed it on Barents Watch, and through these drones, I could actually see live pictures from things going up in Svalbard, which shows how new technology is improving very fast. But I will share my screen. So I will start with, we have many of the same challenges as was mentioned for search and rescue. And the way it is in Norway is search and rescue is leading the operation as long as there are people involved, people that needs to be rescued. But after that life and health situation is controlled, it's handling the situation over to the Norwegian Coastal Administration. And the ship we just saw is a very good example of that. After all the people were rescued from the boat, sort of Norwegian Coastal Administration responsibility to follow up, to offload all the fuel from the boat, and at the end actually remove the boat from this very far remote 80 degrees north site. So it is exactly the same, the remoteness, the climate, the weather forecast is not very good for these areas. So you sort of have to have local knowledge about how weather is changing, how if it probably the drift ice will move in the next hours, the next days, things like that is not easy to get any information you need, sort of been working up there for a long time. I have actually worked up at the governor's office as head of the department for the environment for quite a few years. So I have experience for many years up there too. It's very beneficial for me today with the position I have today. So it doesn't want to change here. Any suggestions for? There's the one. Okay, I will also start with a lot of agreements that is very important. In the Arctic Council, in 2013, we signed an agreement about oil pollution preparedness and response in the Arctic. And all the Arctic countries have signed that. And today there is exercises yearly. We also do a lot of research together. We share new technology, which is very important because to handle oil in ice is very difficult. All the conventional methods have big problems when it comes to heavy ice because it just booms and things that will be broken in a few minutes if you put them out in heavy drift ice, for example. So there's a lot of information exchange and there's a lot of research and development going on in this under this agreement today. But I also like to mention the same agreement that
Excuse
was
me,
the search and rescue.
Rune, can you hear me?
Yeah.
We can see your presentation very well, so I will share your presentation for you, and
okay.
You can tell me when to proceed to the next slide, okay?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, go on. Next. Yeah. This agreement, which both covers the search and rescue and to combat oil pollution in the Barents Sea, has been signed. That was very early. We even actually started to cooperate with Russia in 1990. And this cooperation has been going on yearly since then. And it has been a lot of different activities besides exercises. Next, please. So we have these meetings every year where we discuss what sort of exercises we should, what we should focus on, and how we should cooperate. And the cooperation is very important. And we have the vessel traffic control center in Vardø, who has the daily contact with Murmansk. So they actually would alert each other and start an operation, and we would be actually alerted by the Vardø traffic control center. And that's how accident is handling, and that daily contact they have is very important. Next one. So this plan is have guidance for how we cooperate, how we actually should handle oil spill responses, because you need to cross the borders. You have to get very fast clearance if something is happening. You can't go the way through all diplomacy to get the permissions to cross the border. You have to be able to sail fast, and that's very important when it comes to helping each other up in the north. There are so few resources, so we both depend on each other to actually handle a big accident. Next one, please. So here, this was redesigned in 2014 with some amendments. It's been growing since 94, but it's a lot of focus on oil spills and how to handle that. And both nations now have oil activities going on up in the north, with platforms producing gas and oil out in the Barents Sea, which is also a big focus for the cooperation now. Next, please. So I won't go through all this, but we have done all these exercises every year. But we have also added on, we actually made a special laboratory in Murmansk together with the Russians that was going in, because you need to know what sort of oil you're handling, because oil is very different. There's some very thick oils that you have to handle with special pumps, special collecting devices when you are gathering them from the sea. So you have to know what sort of oil you're actually acting on. So we have actually been building up a laboratory in Murmansk who can check oils on the Russian side and give information, which is very important. What sort of equipment, what sort of pumps, skimmers, etc. should we bring if we are asked to help. Next, please. There's also some pictures from And as I said, there is a joint. We have Russian people on Norwegian boats, Norwegian Coast Guard boats. We have Norwegians on Russian boats. We learn from each other. We cooperate, and that works very well. And it's been a lot of people know each other, and they have been working for many years. And that's also very important when it comes to real accident, that both the organizations and the actual people knows each other when something is happening. Next, please. So we also have working with spill contingency plans together. We have been having courses for training first responders and on-scene commanders on they we actually used the Norwegian system in Russia. And we had exercising close to Murmansk, where we've been training this. We have also have support from the World Wildlife Foundation when it comes to what we call volunteers. That's because if you have oil on the beach, you need a lot of people to actually clean up. There is no easy way to clean beaches. You need a lot of manpower. You need to use your hands and shovels and that sort of equipment. So you need a lot of people on the site. So we have also used the World Wildlife Foundations to actually, they have a system in Norway, and they have also an organization in Russia that we now use. So they could actually have volunteers that would assist if there was a big oil spill that reached the beaches. So we also done a lot of tabletop exercises. We have a lot of seminars and workshops together. And that has been very fruitful for both parts. We can learn from each other, and that's very important. Next, please. And I will say something about what NCA, Norwegian Coastal Administration, is doing when it comes to, because the most important is to prevent accidents from happening. But of course, I work when the accidents happen, and we know that even if we do a lot of work to prevent them, there will eventually happen some accidents, hopefully less and less in the future. But we have this traffic separation scheme that goes along the Norwegian coast. And when there's a ship sailing from Russia, they are informing the traffic control center in Vardø, so they know it before, and the other way when there's a ship coming from Norway and into Russia. And especially if there's ships that goes with the hazardous content as the cargo, or so we know if there's a big oil tanker, we know if there's some that could cause environmental disasters. So we follow those ships very closely the whole way. So this separation route is approved by IMO in 2013, and that brought the ships further from the coast. And we see now that all ships are actually following these routes. Next, please. And the one thing that's very important is the RMO time, also the time for response, mobilization, and operational time increases a lot when you bring them so far out from the coast. So we have this towing vessels that's situated along the coast, and if there's a special bad weather forecast, or if there is a really large oil tanker, other hazardous cargo going along the coast, we situate those towing vessels so they can reach them. And if something happens in them, if they have a engine failure, things like that, you have the time to respond to actually reach the boat before it actually is grounded. So and the vessel traffic center, they actually follow the ships, and as soon as they stop, or if they actually don't follow the shipping lane that they should, they would call them immediately and ask, what's your problem? Why are you doing it? So we get very early warnings, and that is probably the most important thing. Next, please. I'd also like to show you some of the satellite surveillance. Norway was very early to start this, and this a lot of other countries has now adopted the Norwegian system. But on the picture, you can see a little thin black stripe outside the larger black dot there, that is typically a stripe of oil on a satellite picture. Click, please. And we can backtrack by the AIS system, which every boat has to send out the AIS signal. And that is stored in computer, so we can actually backtrack it. And we could see which ship was doing it. Next, please. And then investigate, it was actually a dead whale. And it was actually oil from, as you know, the blubber from whales are very oily. So it was actually blubber oil that was seen on the satellite picture. So it was actually the Coast Guard who was towing the whale away from the shoreline because they're smelly and they want to take them out and sink them on deep waters. So that's how accurate this satellite surveillance is. And I think it actually also has, because all the boats know that they could be seen by satellite, it's not very common now to do what they did before to clean the engine, have a dirty water polluted with oil that they just let go out on with the pumps. They don't do that anymore because they know that somebody is following with, and they could be spotted and they would be heavily fined if we can actually find out which ship it is. Next, please. So here we see the actual picture that it is from, but we get pictures, about 10 pictures every day from different parts of this area. So it's covered in about 3 or 4 days, we cover the total area. But we can also, if we know something is going on, we can, of course, get Kongsberg Satellite Services to order pictures from a specific area. So when this North Guider incident happened, we had satellite pictures about every 5 hours to see if there was actually leaking anything from that ship after it was left by all the crew. Next, please. So we have the emergency towing vessel. There's the traffic center in Vardø. They are positioning them every day. They know where they are, but that used to be a private. As you see, there was a private boat. We actually had 4 tugboats on hire for NCA, but some years ago we decided that we're gonna use the Coast Guard to actually do that service. And we actually now, we brought in 2 new ships, 2 towing vessels, as you see the Coast Guard ship Yard, the picture here, and another one called the Bison. They are actually built as towing vessels, but they do mainly Coast Guard inspections of fisheries, Coast Guard duties that they normally do. But if the weather is bad, or if there is a special transport that we have that could cause an emergency when we are looking at the environment, they are positioned so they could actually intervene and handle that. But we also now have all the other Coast Guard ships. Some of them are very good towing vessels, and they all have towing equipment. So we now actually have much more resources available if we need boat that's in distress that needs a towing vessel. And when you get further south in Norway, we have enough of private resources. We don't need that much government-owned resources, but we don't have that in the north. Next, please. So I'll just show you in the north, we have quite a lot of equipment up in Svalbard. We have so much that we need more storage room up there. So we're actually working with the governor of Svalbard to make a new storage facilities. But we also have equipped governor's ships, Polarsyssel, with oil spill response equipment. And we have 3 smaller boats in Longyearbyen who also has been trained and can bring out oil spill equipment. And we have also quite a lot of oil spill equipment along from Tromsø northwards. We have the aircraft that we can send up. The aircraft can fly from Oslo and up to Spitsbergen and down again without fueling. And I also like to say that the private sector, because there's oil activities in the Barents Sea, they have to provide their own response resources. So they actually have quite a few oil recovery ships that's up in the north. They have also a lot of contracts with fishing boats, fishing vessels, other boats along the northern coast. Next, please. Yeah, this is North Guy there. That's how we sort of had to handle it after the people were rescued. So we ended up actually cut it into small pieces and taking it down to the mainland. That's the end.
Thank you very much, Rune, for your very good presentation. And this is also casting light upon the systems for safety at sea, as well as the agreements and the cooperation on the exercises. It's very good information for us in the Barents Cooperation to get be better known with. Then last part of this webinar will be about green shipping. We have invited 3 different speakers with 3 different perspectives. Global shipping and oversea routes are seen as one of the difficult transport modes when it comes to the green shift. So how can the shipping industry work to fulfill their commitments to meet climate change and energy efficiency goals? The next speaker is not invited to speak on behalf of the world's shipping companies. We wanted to hear from a company that operates in the Arctic every day, all year around, and with very expensive cargo, namely passengers and some goods. I look forward to the presentation on how Hurtigruten Norway is coping with green technology and how they plan to be a part of the green shift. Jerry Larsson Fedde is the leader of maritime operation on Hurtigruten Norway. And Jerry, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Let me start by trying to share my screen. Well, first of all, thank you very much for inviting me and giving me the opportunity to speak at this on behalf of Hurtigruten Norway on this very important and as well challenging topic. I'd like to start by just saying a few words about Hurtigruten Group because there's been some changes during the last 6-7 months to our organization, as well as was mentioned by Tore earlier regarding one of our ships, Roald Amundsen. Since March, we have split the company in 3 brands. So we now have Hurtigruten Norway, which is the traditional Hurtigruten, the coastal express that goes up and down the coast between Bergen and Kirkenes. And then we have Hurtigruten Expedition, which the ship mentioned earlier today, Roald Amundsen, is part of. And then finally, we have a land operations in Svalbard that is under Hurtigruten Svalbard branding. On our Hurtigruten Norway, we are currently operating 7 ships that are on a route between, as I said, between Bergen and Kirkenes, with the 34 different ports of call year around. And we carry, in addition to our passengers and local passengers, we also carry goods and cars as well. To the topic, Hurtigruten basically lives on 2 things, nature and people. And the nature we sail in and the customer who wants to experience our coast and people who live here. And we have to be the first to admit that our industry has contributed to greenhouse gas emissions and pollutions of the sea. And we must take our responsibility to clean up and contribute to achieving the climate goals, especially because we operate in valuable and vulnerable areas such as the Arctic. Recently, Hurtigruten had a news release stating that we are currently embarking on a major retrofit project starting in February of next year, where we are rebuilding 6 of our ships, including hybridization with battery packs and installation of various modern lower emission engines. This should cut our, and with the inclusion of biofuels, should cut our CO2 emissions by at least 25% and our NOx emissions by 80%. So what have Hurtigruten done so far in regards to green shipping and in regards to the climate? Hurtigruten already in 2010 discontinued the use of heavy fuel oils. In 2018, we discontinued the use of single-use plastics. We have installed shore power on all our ships. We have installed the SCR, the selective catalytic reduction systems, on board one of our ships. We will install that on all the ships within next year and 2023. We are doing the hybrid upgrades on 3 of our ships starting next year. We are doing hull modifications on all our ships in order to reduce drag and therefore reduce the fuel consumption and the CO2 emissions. We are currently using sustainable biofuel that is certified, and we are installing wastewater treatment systems on all our ships over the next year, year and a half. These are some of the things that we already either have done or are in the process of doing. So what do we believe that the regulators can do to improve the green shipping and improve the impact we have on the climate? First of all, we believe that we need to introduce restrictions or regulations that reduces the harmful effect of mass tourism in vulnerable destinations. This may involve size restrictions or requirement for cooperation with local suppliers and players to ensure the greatest possible local ripple effects of this mass tourism that we now see on our coastline, all the way from the south to the northernmost part of our country. We believe that should be established regulations against sewage discharge, especially related to untreated sewage discharge. Recently or today, the regulations in Norway are quite unrestricted if you compare them with some of our other countries around Europe, and especially if you go to the US, Alaska, and those areas. The same goes for the biofouling or the hull scrubbing that we still allow in most ports in Norway. Hull scrubbing as well can lead to import of alien species into our waters, and obviously, if we allow that, there will also be parts of the fouling that will be entering into the oceans. And then in general, we believe that we should impose stricter requirements for a sustainable cruise industry in Norway, which means certain things like introducing a ban on heavy fuels, of use of heavy fuels in Norwegian waters, including a ban to carry heavy fuels on board. Coming from an industry, before I joined Hurtigruten, I worked for several of the major cruise lines, and those ships are getting larger and larger, and they carry more and more fuel. On this topic, we should also lead the way internationally to work for a ban on heavy fuels in the Arctic. And finally, carry out further research on the potential harmful effect of open loop scrubbers and implement restrictions based on the research. Most larger cruise lines today have installed open loop scrubbers because by doing so, they can comply with the 0.5% sulfur content of the heavy fuel oil, and therefore the investment of scrubbers is paid back in less than a year. But we believe that more research needs to be done to see what is the actual effect of taking the sulfur instead of it goes through the funnel and into the air, but basically ends up in the oceans instead. We think we should secure identical rules of the game for the entire Norwegian coast, not only for the World Heritage Fjords and Svalbard. We support stricter requirements in the World Heritage Fjords, but this must ensure that companies have the time and opportunity to follow them fully. That means we need to follow the technology and see, is the technology actually available for us to operate the ships in following those regulations. And then finally, we believe that we should implement a demand for emission cuts in Norwegian waters. This has already been implemented for Kystruten, which means Hurtigruten Norway and Havila when they arrive with their ships, and we believe this is something that also should be implemented for other ships operating on the Norwegian coast or outside the Norwegian coast in Norwegian waters. In regards to the way forward, we believe that we need further collaboration between the shipping industry and the government on the development of zero-emission technology. We need to secure an infrastructure for alternative green fuels along the Norwegian coast. One thing is to talk about hydrogen and using hydrogen, but there's a difference between brown hydrogen and green and blue hydrogen. And that is, we need to look a little bit further down the value chain, making sure that the production and everything is climate friendly, not only the use of it. So that's an important part we need to look at moving forward. And we need a governmental support for research and development projects or pilot projects to accelerate the development of feasible solutions and greener solutions for our industry moving forward. And finally, knowing that this is being discussed very recently in regards to the CO2 taxes, we believe that we should establish a CO2 fund for the development of green technology in Norway, similar to what the very successful NOx fund has been doing over the last years. And that finally concludes my presentation, and thank you again for giving me this opportunity to speak at this webinar. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jerry, and not at least for the input to the regulators. And policy development is a dynamic exercise based on knowledge, engagement, and a struggle between different interests. Bringing in the knowledge and engagement of the NGOs contributes to policy development, and it's very important. And therefore, it is a pleasure to give the floor to Jan Dosik from the Arctic Program in the World Wildlife Foundation and receive their input on green shipping in the Arctic. And Jan, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, and thank you for the invitation. And I'm happy to follow on where Hortikruten presentation has ended, because there is direct connections. So I hope you can see the screen. So of course we know that the shipping in the Arctic is on the growth, and the Arctic Council data confirms that the number of the ships as well as the distance of travel has increased, and this is going to be the case into the future as well, including the plans with the Northern Sea Route. We can see the extension of the navigation season. We can see also the new navigation routes and options that are becoming available. We can also see that it's not just the shipping, but also the terrestrial infrastructure that that comes into play. And we can see that there is more competition for space within the oceans with other human activities, such as fishing, but also extractives, tourism, which was just mentioned, or military. And also the changing climate, which is changing much faster in the Arctic than in many other parts of the world. The climate change impacts will have an impact also on the fauna movements. There is a range of environmental concerns in Arctic shipping. Some of them were already elaborated, such as the air pollution and the risks of oil spills, which are also, of course, important. The overall question of greenhouse gas emissions, not just the CO2, but also black carbon and methane. But also issues like the underwater noise and its increase that is coming along with the increased shipping, the ship strikes with marine animals as the shipping intensifies, and also the impacts of infrastructure, the port infrastructure on land. But probably the biggest ask is the transition to new shipping fuels and what can be done and how quickly. And we know that the carriage of oil-based fuels and operation with the oil-based fuels is a ticking bomb. It is HFO issue as well, which is still persistent, and we have now the ban from IMO, but it's not. It will not be fully implemented by 2024 unless there is an agreement to do so. There are various black carbon reduction initiatives. There's also efforts to see whether the very low sulfur fuel oil could be a solution, but that's also tricky, and there is potential loopholes to the ban that already exists. There are other fuels in play and being promoted, such as LNG, nuclear fuels, or the blue hydrogen. They are all partial solutions, but they also have sustainability questions. So all in all, technology is there and will be there to deliver. They need the right incentives, as Hurtigruten has just presented, and we need a transition pathway towards the decarbonization of the shipping in the Arctic, and black carbon reduction targets that are being discussed now in the Arctic Council are also part of the solution. I wanted to mention the underwater noise as a growing problem. More specifically, we know that noise travels in a specific way. It has more significant impacts, and it can have cumulative impacts with other underwater noise sources. And on one hand, it can be the mining, oil and gas extraction, but there's also the ice breaking that has its own noise signature. It has an impact on ecosystems, on the livelihoods, and on the indigenous cultures. So we are very happy that both the Arctic Council in its PAIM working group is looking into the modeling and potential mitigation measures, but also that IMO will now be reviewing their 2014 guidelines and hopefully also adding Arctic-specific targets. And part of the solutions is also how the voyage planning and the speed management can play a role in reducing the impacts of the underwater noise. The Polar Code was mentioned. It is indeed an important achievement. There is now discussion whether additional vessels should be included. The so-called non-SLS vessels, which we believe there is a merit to include them, because especially in the Arctic waters, there is a significant part of risk associated with those smaller vessels. There's also some issues with implementation, and we as WWF have been looking in some of these, and will be presenting our conclusions in the various fora. But there is questions about the compliance by the flag states, whether the categorization is operating properly, to what extent the voyage planning requirements are applied and can be improved. But there's also specific gaps which need to be filled either in the Polar Code or in other instruments. So it's a framework, but the specific addressing of these needs still needs to happen. And of course, learning lessons from incidents which has happened in polar waters is something that takes its part as well. And all in all, we believe that the time is coming when we should look holistically at the Polar Code, how it is implemented, and how it could be improved. Finally, what are the goals from WWF for Arctic shipping? We recognize that there will be more shipping, but we would like to see at the same time that the environmental footprint does not increase with the increased shipping, and addressing all the components which are referred to. And specifically, we believe that the HFO ban should apply fully and completely by 2024, and not with all the extensions and waivers in 2029. We are working in partnership with Arctic Council members, but also with sister environmental organizations in so-called Clean Arctic Alliance. And of course, the solutions cannot be applied by international or national players or the private sector. It needs to be a concerted action if we are to succeed to reduce the environmental footprint of shipping in the Arctic. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jan, for your very good presentation. The last intervention today is from Sweden, and Sweden, as in many other countries, the overall goal is to reduce the greenhouse gas emissions from the transport. And since we today are focusing on sea transport, I'm interested in what kind of measures will be in place for this important and global industry, ensuring a development in line with the overall goal of reduction. And it is a pleasure to give the floor to Sabina Hoppe from the Swedish Maritime Administration. Sabina, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. I shall just start to share my presentation here. And let's see. So So first of all, thank you for having me here. My name is Sabina Hoppe, as you said, and I'm the head of the Environmental and Sustainability Unit here at the Swedish Maritime Administration. And today I'm going to try to give you our view on green shipping as a governmental institution and how we work with it. So first of all, shipping is a transport medium that has a good environmental potential. However, there are still things that need to be addressed when we look at pollution, international regulations, and also the transport efficiency. So what can we as a governmental institution do to support the progress? Well, I think foremost, we should show the way forward when it comes to environmental friendly shipping. We at the SMA does so by using an environmental index that gives discounts on the fairway fees for ships and boats loading and unloading goods or passengers in Swedish harbors if they have made compliances above environmental legislations. And the environmental index that we use is called Clean Shipping Index. So here, as I said, we have a bonus system where the cleaner ships get money back from the fairways fee that they pay. So in this index, we have a lot of different parameters included. We have 7 different categories where stuff like parameters like SOx, NOx, CO2, and chemicals are included. And then we divide the ships in different categories depending on how many points they get in the system. And depending on the points and the categories, they get different discounts on the fairway fees. This system also uses a third-part verification, which means that we can make sure that everything is up to code, everything is working as it should be. So we at SMA, we also have our own fleet that we can work with. And that makes it both complicated and fun because we have a kind of two different roles to fill here in Sweden. But for now, the Swedish government has proposed an addition of 45 million Swedish crowns for a period of 3 years to us at SMA to be able to work with just green shipping and the goal of fossil-free fleets. So this is yet to be passed by the parliament, but if it goes through, we can do some really good work, not only with the technology, but also with the softer values that also needs to be addressed. But while we wait to see how this is going to work, we also have some projects going on. And the base of our work at the Swedish Maritime Administration started when we started to look at our fleet and the CO2 that comes from our fleet. And we realized that approximately 90% of the CO2 from the Swedish Maritime Administration comes from our fleet. So we needed to do something about this. And we have some pilot boats that we use. And these boats often run short spans between the harbors and the boats requiring assistance. So therefore, we have started a project called Fast Water, where we use methanol instead of fossil fuels or diesel to see if that is an option to use instead of using diesel for these boats. It started rarely or newly, so we don't have the full results yet, but it looks promising. Another project that we have is to use drones for controlling the ice properties instead of starting up the fleet, the icebreaking fleet, and going out to look for themselves. We have wanted to start a project where we have cameras in the fairways that can see the ice properties, but also use drones to go out and to check the ice. And by doing this, we save not only the environment, but we also save a lot of money since the vessels are really expensive to start up. Another project that we have going on is a new working boat that is working in the sluices with the maintenance of the sluices, which is an electric diesel hybrid called Prickbjörn. The idea is that by using this boat, we will improve not only the environment, but also the working environment, since the electric drive is much easier for the people working on the boat. It's not as loud, and it's not letting out a lot of air pollution. So we have this boat in Trollhättan, and the idea is that if it works, we're going to try to have more working boats that is a hybrid that works on electric or diesel. Also, we have started to do some docks with landlines to use the shore power instead of letting the boats use their own diesel to heat up the boat and to get power from it, which shows good results so far, but also we have the infrastructure that needs to be working good to make sure that this is okay. So finally, I would say that we're in a very exciting time right now. There's a lot of stuff going on. Hopefully we will get this extra money, which will put us ahead of schedule. But even if we don't get them, we have a lot of passion to do stuff for that will gain the environment we gain from. And our solution has also been that if we don't get the money, we will apply for research grants. For example, Jan mentioned underwater noise, and we have a project right now that we have applied for just to go into this underwater noise, as we see that is a really big problem. And how can we work with this? Can we do something with the fairways, for example, how they're formed, what materials we use? So we need to think outside the box and look at what can we do as a governmental institution, and how can we propel this forward? Because I think it's really important that we don't put everything on the private market. We should do something for ourselves, and we should show the way, and we should lead the way. And with that, I would like to thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Sabina, for your also very good intervention and casting light upon the perspectives seen from the governmental side. And dear friends, it is time to wrap up this webinar. We have received very good interventions, casting light upon many aspects, from the importance of education and competence to how oil spill is handled in cold waters. We have heard from the Arctic Council how they are dealing with maritime transport, which is very interesting for us in the Barents Cooperation. And in addition, insights and very good examples of collaboration within search and rescue. And at the last part, different aspects of green shipping. I do hope you have had a fruitful time together with us. And the last words and the special thanks goes now to the interpreters and the speakers, as well as the professional staff of Mevin, who stood for the technical production of today's webinar. On behalf of the Norwegian Ministry of Transport, I would like to thank everybody who have joined in to watch this seminar. I wish you a pleasant day.